Cloning, well, cloning's been possible. They cloned sheep back in the 90s. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. We've just ethically not done any of that kind of stuff with humans. Yes? Sure.
So for behavior altering medication,
Sure.
like when people used to make us take Adderall.
Okay.
Do you think that that's like along the same lines as this?
Um,
Or like not as serious?
I think that there are some chemical imbalances that people have that medications like Adderall, medications like depression medications, things like that, do help to combat. And I don't see that as fundamentally changing who you are, which is doing this DNA splicing is affecting, if you stop taking the medication, you'll go back to what you were. You can't go back from changing your DNA. You know what I mean? So this is a therapeutic method of trying to get you to be able to focus or be able to not be depressed or these kinds of things. You know what I mean? So I do see them kind of as differently because of the permanence. And that it's not reversible. Okay, so we're jumping into a transport unit, combining cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system. And again, just kind of hitting highlights of these three pieces. So today we're going to talk about blood, and we'll maybe get into the route of the circulatory system. But let's talk about the blood to begin with. This diagram is on page 327. I'd love if you wanted to go there with me. There is a whole lovely chapter on the blood and what makes it up. But this diagram really sums it up in one lovely piece, all in one place. Your blood is really made up of two pieces. You have the plasma, and you have the formed elements. Did I get is it the wrong page there? Sorry. 329, they're saying? 320. Well, my apologies. There it is, 320. I didn't realize that was the old book's page information, so my apologies. Page 320. So if you wanted to scribble that out on your study guide there, I'll change it on the one I put up in Schoology, but it's not 327, it's page 320. So it's two pieces. It's plasma and it's formed elements. Has anybody heard anybody talk about giving plasma before? Sure. So you're giving blood. When you're giving blood, you're giving whole blood. That's what they'll call it now. So if you go, has anybody ever given blood before? I'm curious. This group too small? Because you do have to meet certain height and weight requirements and age requirements. What's that? No, I think it's 18 or with the consent of your parents. Yeah.
I did feel like medically you said
So there's two pieces, plasma and formed elements. The formed elements are all of the other stuff aside from basically plasma is water. You can see this, right? The 92% of your of the plasma is water. Plasma makes up the majority of the blood, 55% of it. And the rest are these formed elements. Okay, so let's talk briefly about these formed elements. One main piece of the formed elements is the red blood cells. And this is what kind of these disc-shaped things like this, right? This kind of shape to them. Well, this is actually a blood vessel. Yeah, and that's the fat that kind of totally occluded it. These guys here? I don't know, to be honest with you. Could be. The red blood cells. What do red blood cells do, my friends? Not these guys. They carry oxygen. What in particular, I'm not sure if it's an enzyme, what's the word I want? What protein is it that carries this oxygen? You should. It has a G in it. Hemoglobin. Okay? Hemoglobin. And this is when those blood cells move to the lungs, and we'll talk about the route that blood takes. The oxygen that you breathe in that gets into your lungs is transferred to that hemoglobin in the red blood cells. That red blood cell then takes that oxygen to whatever cell needs it, whether it's a muscle or whether it's a nerve or whether it's the digestion system, whatever. It takes that oxygen to it, right? So that's the main part of the formed elements. Two other pieces, platelets and white blood cells. What are platelets? They are like little plates. This is for the dinner, so the red blood cells don't have to eat on the paper plates. They can use a plate. No, not at all. Take a peek, take a peek. She's peeking. She's trying to find it. Peek faster. The formed elements, the platelets. Where are we at? Red blood cells there.
Oh wait, so when they poked Jesus in the side, they were looking for like blood versus plasma?
Talk about the water flowing from his sides, that you're saying?
Yeah.
On page 327 is blood platelets. I think it was more like I'm just trying to stab him and kill him kind of thing. Yeah. And the water flowing just basically meaning that, yes, it was blood, but it's also just the abdominal fluid that's present there.
They help close breaks and damage.
Yeah. Yeah. What does it say?
It says that they help close breaks and damage blood.
Okay, so platelets are like they're like little pieces of these blood cells, and they help form clots, right? When there's a damage to the blood cells, this is the part that helps to form the clots. Have you ever thought of this? A heart attack. Does anyone know what a heart attack is? There's a clot where? In the arteries that feed your heart. Okay? How about a stroke? Anyone know what a stroke is? It's a clot that forms where? In your brain. Sure, right. One of the arteries of the brain. Right? Good. How about a pulmonary embolism? Anyone know what this is? It's a clot that forms where? An artery in where? The pulmonary system, which is your lungs. Sure. Are you comfortable that clots are bad? Okay, so here's this. So listen. This is an amazing point. It's not mine. Why don't we die all the time then? As soon as you cut yourself, right? What happens? You bleed, right? But the blood starts clotting, right? Why doesn't it just clot all the time? It reacts with the oxygen, but there's oxygen in the blood, right? It's attached to the hemoglobin. There is this process that when these damages occur, it takes the blood that has all the things it needs to clot and starts the clotting process. If that started too soon, you would die. If it didn't start at all, you would die. It's this very finely tuned, balanced machine, you could call it. This clotting process. That book, Darwin's Black Box, Michael Behe, he talks about some of these systems that you have to have all in place, otherwise you just couldn't function. He calls this one of those systems, irreducibly complex. You can't take out one piece of this blood clotting mechanism. If you did, you either would clot too soon or not clot at all. And both of those are deadly. It has to be just when the vessel is damaged and only in the area where the damage is. It can't suddenly say, okay, all the blood start clotting if I just cut my finger. Are you with me? Quietly fine-tuned. Quite a fine-tuned instrument. What's that? So bruises are just, you've broken some blood vessels, but it's under the skin. And so the bleeding, when you see where it turns black and blue and then green and yellow and as days pass, is bleeding in underneath the skin, in between the layers of the skin. It just doesn't break the surface. Yeah, please.
So if you have that disease where like you have excessive bleeding, is that
Yeah.
because of the lack of platelets?
It can be. Again, there's a whole series of factors that make you clot. And we're not going through all of those. But yeah, you have some difficulties either with some of the enzymes that control that. It can be a lack of the platelets. There's a lot of things that can cause that. Yeah. So in the blood, formed elements, red blood cells, what do? Carry oxygen. What do the platelets do? Good. Initiate formation of blood clots. And then last but not least, we have the white blood cells. And these are the soldiers. And here's a list of what they are. Neutrophils and eosinophiles and basophils and monocytes and lymphocytes. All of these guys help fight intruders, right? They protect against infection. You do not. You do not. Just what's on the sheet's all you need to know. Okay? I would probably not give you the diagram like this. I would probably ask you questions about the diagram. Yes, ma'am?
How come with like stuff like they have a higher amount of white blood cells compared to black?
It's not that the high amount of blood cells is bad. It's just telling us when you take the blood levels that something is going on, that the body's actively trying to fight against some sort of infection or some sort of problem that's happened there. So not that increasing those levels are necessarily bad. It's just telling us the body's responding to something. Okay? Formed elements, about 45% of the blood. 55% is the plasma. What is plasma mostly made of? Water. 92% is water. Couple other things that are mentioned here. The next biggest one is proteins. Proteins make up 7%, so 92 and 7 is 99%. So 99% of the plasma are these two things, water and proteins, right? And the proteins, their main job is to help regulate the movement of water between the blood and the tissues. Because realize, most of the blood is water, right? And the body needs water to do all the things that it does, right? So how does it get this water various places? In the blood. So some of that water is absorbed by various tissues and used for various processes. Okay? And these are the guys that do that. The albumins, the globulins, the fibrinogens. Fibrinogen is another one that is part of the clotting process. And last but not least, you've got a couple other pieces that are in this plasma, only making up 1% of the total. Electrolytes. What are electrolytes? Things in water. Good. You think of it as energy like Gatorade and that kind of stuff, right?
Electrolytes?
Yeah. Do you remember? This is like back to chemistry. Has to do with salts. Yeah, these are the pieces, right? The ions. Potassium, sodium, right? These kinds of things. When you sweat, right? These are some of the things you lose. And so you drinking the Gatorade to help restore that electrolyte balance, right? How about wastes? What are wastes from? Okay, but this is on a cellular level. So it would be like the cellular waste. Remember from our cellular respiration? And we had some of the waste products that were produced in the muscles. It was lactic acid, things like this, right? These things we put into the blood. Not like feces waste. Okay, that's in the digestive system. But this is like cellular waste. Nutrients, vitamins, hormones. These things all travel in the blood. Right? Remember hormones from the brain or from these glands sent far distance away? How do they get there? In the blood. Right? And then last but not least, some of the gases that are dissolved in the plasma. Oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. Have you heard of a thing called the bends? If anyone is a scuba diver, this is where these nitrogen bubbles, if you descend or come up too quickly, and it's usually coming up too quickly, these the nitrogen dissolved in your blood actually becomes bubbles. It like comes out of the blood and causes significant pain because it's in the joints is where they usually collect. So in your back, in your elbows, your knees. Very painful. You have to pressurize them to get those gases to dissolve again and then slowly bring them up. It's quite interesting. And you can die. It is something you can die of. If these bubbles get to your brain, obviously they'll do some damage because your brain's not meant to be a carbonated beverage. So, okay? So and the blood is, you think, oh, it's just a drop of blood, but there really is a ton of things that are in that blood. And why do we have blood? Like, what's the point of it? To transport things, right? To transport all of these things to the various parts of the body. Every cell in your body gets blood flow. It wouldn't live otherwise, right? It's what brings it the oxygen and the nutrients and gets rid of the wastes. It's the transport system. Okay? Any questions there? All right, I'm going to stop this so this can start compiling.